We are in the heart of Cancer Alley, even though you wouldn't know that being on Tulane University surrounded by beautiful oak trees. But I think we've really come at exhaustion and imagination and thinking about geological time and colonial time and corporate conquest time, and trying to link the imagination that's been used for good and evil, if there could be, so simply say, which was not possible. And being in a place like Bulbuncha, which we know better as New Orleans, there are so many layers of exhaustion. And in these times, I think what is really needed is for us to reimagine and to find a way to acknowledge the natural intelligence and find a way to collaborate to restore a sense of balance. And yeah, I think that my personal work or life or whatever it is that I'm doing with myself and trying to understand my place in the world has been informed so much by the complicated layers here. And so, in talking about and designing this seminar with Monica and Adam, we've definitely, I think, all been so influenced by being in this specific site and recognizing its dynamic, ever-changing, always teaching and always challenging space.
I think a thing I've heard you, Monique, talk about before, and I think about a lot too, is the places that I go and return to over and over, how much I learn from them and how much intelligence is already there. And so when Monique and we're talking about imagination and exhaustion and imagination again, I think about in particular some of the areas in this region, and that we need to get specific when we talk. I think about areas in the region, but I think about some areas in the wetland where, when it's healthy, it's like aerated and spongy, and you might actually think you can, in some cases, think you can step on this land because it looks very solid, but in fact you might sink in, and that's actually like a pretty good it can be a good thing, and that kind of fluid, so you don't always know where you're going to find like solid footing, or that solid footing will change depending on the time of the year, depending on a lot of things. For sure, it also, of course, depending on lots of human influences. But my point here is that like inability to really know when you're going to have solid footing, or the fact that when I am already having to get used to unsolid footing all the time, but that is actually really productive territory to kind of keep shifting in that kind of that fluidity, that knowledge that there's one place isn't going to stay stable. That's not what it really looks like. And I think that that's something that, like, imagining into that space is really amazing and important. And I think it's like the more that I learn about the wetlands, the more I get some cues about how I can move, and that is environmentally, for sure. That is also, I relate to that very personally in terms of identity. I think about it in terms of racial identity. I think there are major structures and systems, violent systems that have been set up to make very fixed realities, and so I think that there's a lot to learn from, like this ecology right here.
Yeah, and just to add a lot to learn from how imagination and engineering can actually cut off lifelines. And so a lot of our traveling through this territory will be following these old bayous, following the high grounds, to the ends of the road where you have these, and for one example being the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet, which is this federal canal that was built for all of this, promise of progress and commerce and what have you, and in the process has totally decimated a vibrant ecology. So I think that, that being tied to the exhaustion, but how the imagination has led to exhaustion. And it's not, so I think it's looking at that too, and those examples that are both seen and unseen. And just being inside, I call the city the concrete lily pad, because we're surrounded by these walls, which are giving us this artificial sense of security. And reality, this is not reality, right? But it is. And so I think that, because we're going to be going inside and outside levee protections and thinking about, those past projects and also the future projects that are being laid on the table for the state to kind of re-engineer, reconnecting the river to the wetlands for restoration, but also how there are all of these contradictions that exist, even with the funding of how, essentially the state of Louisiana has a coastal master plan that is based on deep water oil and gas extraction into the infinite future. So, I think.
I think one thing that is really important in my practice, and actually I would say that Monique and Adam and I have been talking about this and organizing this seminar too, so that I don't hold this alone, but is so when I kind of look back or realize so much of what I'm thinking about is whether it's like looking at or listening to underwater sound, or feeling where I'm standing, right where my feet are, what's like directly beneath me. I think about the things that are seen, that we can actually like visibly see and name, and the things that are very much there, but have often been hidden, remain unseen, and trying to bring those to the surface. So a sound, sometimes maybe sound is a medium to try to enter other material, enter history, enter ecological material, and so a lot of times I think what we're asking people to do is like imagine into something that they can't literally see but is always and already there. And sometimes that's kind of speculative and projecting into a space, but that's a thing that in multiple, like you're saying, multiple ways of imagining, that's something that's I think important to me in our seminar.
We've also talked a lot about this idea of experts, and how we're wanting to kind of flatten that hierarchy and think of us all as experts, especially with, we're going to be traveling with 40 people, and that's a lot of knowledge, and people are coming from different places. And so really looking at this as a journey where we're able to be in conversation with each other about what we know and what we don't know, and also leaving the space to really challenge us to think about what could be. If name a historical moment, but also thinking in the future of I always think that, if you let nature do what it does best, it's pretty remarkable how strong it is. And so, with all of the brilliant minds that we'll be with, I think we're really trying to open up that creative space and thinking about it differently.
In terms of our Adam and Monique and my roles, I think we tried to basically in the organizing capacity set up a schedule where we're going to some places that have been important to each of us individually, maybe that we return to over time, that we've learned from, that have challenged us in ways to think to think in all sorts of ways to think differently. And so we're basically taking people to some of those places and hoping, as Monique is saying, that we can really get our brains and minds and imaginations and bodies there and around what can come up there. So I think the more we talk, the more it seems like if we can have that simplicity and then come together with it, that will be great.
Yeah, and the other contributors to our seminar who've been invited, we're thinking of them really as guides, just to help orient in what's unseen, because yes, as the spaces are changing drastically over the last, all the time here, but since colonial times, there's been this re-engineering, renaming. We'll be going to the Pine Island, which is some of the oldest geological land formation, which was a barrier island here a couple thousand years ago. So, you pass by that site, you would never know that, but we'll have those with that knowledge to be able to kind of enhance the experience by recognizing what we're not seeing or being able to attune to things that maybe we're not listening for. So we're really wanting this to be a sensory overload and trying to share those bits and pieces of information that are important, but also allowing space for people to kind of literally take it in. I think that being at this location, it is a microcosm that reflects realities all over the planet, and also is because we are in this part of the Mississippi, which is a major port for the world, and because we're going to be passing by sugar and petro refineries, New Orleans is global because of because of the water that kind of, this in-between, we're like in the in-between zone here, which I think is really fascinating, and for my own recent kind of just wondering, just like this magic zone that we're in, where you have fresh and salt water that are meeting, and the challenges that come with sea level rise, but those connections to extraction practices and how that relates to social and racial realities. I think that we can be hyper-local, but we're talking about realities that are all over the planet.
And I think about that in terms of history too, actually, like thinking about the way that this particular region was colonized and the way, the way if you follow the history here, you're very quickly going to be into the financial market in London, or you're going to be very quickly in international commerce and capitalism through following sugar plantations, through following enslavement, through following
the pipeline.
The pipeline, absolutely, exactly.
Bankers in Switzerland are funding projects that are going through the wetlands, that are tapping into these refineries that are shipping product to China, right? Like, that's what this place is. That's why this place exists. That's why they've created this fortified wall around us. It's not necessarily for community or for biodiversity, but it's like commerce rules everything here. And that has been the case since, the company of John Law funding the expansion of the territory. So Yeah, yeah.
You look forward and look back and look right now, and they're all connected. I mean, I think we've been talking about one of the really big strengths of this is that we get that 40 plus people who have all sorts of knowledge sets, have all sorts of different kinds of knowledge, who've often spent a lot of time thinking and living and experiencing what we're going to be talking about, are coming together to think around these particular topics. And so that in itself, like doing the best to find a way to just like actually literally get to talk to each other about this is the first step of like that feels generative. We've talked also, and I feel like we've talked also a lot about how to shift into imagining. Like, I think you said some things really articulately about this, actually.
I feel that we need good examples of alternative possibilities. And I believe that if solutions can emerge in a place that is known as Cancer Alley in the petrochemical corridor of the United States, that it can go really far. And if those examples can challenge the status quo of what is considered the only way here in South Louisiana, which is that you have oil and gas or you have nothing, which is what we've been told so much. And knowing how that relates to this Anthropocene era, right? I don't know we don't have like a destination that we know is really clear. I think that we're hoping that allowing space for emergence and long-term relationships that can connect with other places in the United States, in Germany, in Africa, in China, and wherever, where we can be in conversation long-term. I think that for me, that's my hope, is that, we've got a lot of really good, bad examples of imagination gone sideways. To look at that, but then also to recognize the power of imagination and how it can shift and is so unexpectedly beautiful at times, and can teach and can learn. So I'm hoping that that there are some really good ideas that maybe they're just said out loud and they aren't manifested for decades to come, but that being able to drop those seeds of what could be possible and get out of this kind of black box that we're pushing up against and feeling suffocated by is a real outcome that I hope our seminar leads to.